At my 70th birthday, my daughter whispered, "You smell like rotten mud." So I whispered to the lawyer, too, about the $5.7 million she didn't know I had. I walked into the grand hall and felt the eyes weigh me down. Crystals hung from the ceiling, mirrors reflected designer gowns and tuxedos, voices laughing too loud. I was led to a seat near the restroom corridor, tucked away like a shadow waiting to be ignored. I caught Liam's eye, pleading, but the guests were already distracted by champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Joss ascended to the microphone. She cleared her throat elegantly. "We gather tonight for my mother's 70th birthday," she said, voice sweet but sharp. Then she raised the mic toward me, and loud enough for half the room to hear, she declared, "You smell like rotten mud, Mom." The silence that followed rattled my bones. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Some guests tittered behind cupped hands. A woman in pearls whispered, "Did she say mud?" I forced my spine straight. I did not flinch. I clenched my shawl tighter. Candace appeared from behind Joss. With a cruel smile, she grasped a leftover candle from the cake and jammed it into my hair, pressing wax into my scalp. Then she dipped her fingers into the fresh frosting and pressed it into my cheek, spreading it with such force that whipped cream stuck to my eyelashes. She stepped back and spat, "You're just a cheap, stupid decoration." A ripple of laughter echoing through the room felt like hammers striking me. Joss crossed the stage and flicked her wrist. A waiter held a decanter overhead. Red wine streamed onto my lap, soaking my dress. The guests bristled, cameras clicked. I stood, weakening, as Candace pushed me. My foot caught the base of the cake stand. Tiered cake, toppled, layers and icing exploded across marble. Fruit and frosting spatters ran like scars. Liam gasped, eyes wide. The guests froze. Joss surveyed the mess, chin raised. "Don't mess my dress, stinky grandma." Her words struck like nails. With trembling fingers, I knelt and brushed away debris. My fingers found a slit at the cake's base. A small USB gleamed among the crumbs. This is not just proof. It is my voice, preserved, the echoes they tried to bury. I slipped it into my clutch and rose. Candace and Joss stared, faces draining. I held their gaze, heart pounding, lips set. They thought they humiliated me. Instead, they awakened me. I was not always the woman they sneered at in designer gowns. When I first arrived in California, I came with nothing but a battered suitcase and a heart full of hope. I had left behind a small town in Mexico, where my hands dug soil, planted corn, and whispered prayers to the land. I came here to build a life, one day at a time. Before Joss was born, I worked 3 jobs: cleaning houses, scrubbing floors, washing clothes for families who could pay more. I remember one freezing winter when I had only $3 in my pocket and no bread in the house. Joss, then an infant, coughed in her crib. I walked to a bakery, watched people shuffle past warm loaves, and under that street lamp took one. I was arrested, handcuffed. The judge dismissed the case after the story broke that I was trying to feed my child, but the record stayed. That moment branded me, the bread thief, in the minds of a few neighbors who remembered and whispered. Joss was 10 when kids on the playground started calling her Mud Baby, Mud Mom's daughter, mocking the way her clothes smelled after school because I washed them in collected rainwater. We had no laundromat money. I carried buckets of water from the roof gutter. The clothes dried under the sun, heavy with dust and the scent of earth. One day she cried to me, "Mom, please don't make me smell like dirt." That memory never left me. At school, she wore hand-me-downs. One jacket had patches from years of repair. Another child, holding their nose, teased, "She smells like soil and sweat." Joss swallowed the insult, red-faced. She grew into that ache of shame, of wanting everything clean, perfect, sanitized. She internalized, if the world could not remove the mud, she would bury it. I never pressured her, but I could see her pulling away. She refused my tortillas made from stone-ground corn, complaining they tasted too rustic. She threw away gifts I crafted, crocheted scarves, old photo frames, calling them outdated junk. I was reduced to a museum relic in my own home. When she became an adult, she built her life around luxury, fragrance, and cleanliness. She told clients she had no time for reminders of the past. She bought houses in hills, installed air purifiers, and never opened windows. She banned soil-smelling foods in her kitchen. She refused my presence in the spa she built, saying, "I want my brand to smell like success, not dust." She once turned to me and said, "Mom, I promise I will never let mud touch me again." In her voice was a vow, in my heart, a wound. She separated herself from everything that made me. She cut ties to the smell of tortillas at dawn, to the smell of rain on dry earth, to the smell of effort and survival. I kept forgiving myself for the past, but Joss never forgave me. In her mind, every grain of soil, every patchwork quilt, every sip of water from the roof meant I had failed her. And now tonight, she would remind me of that failure in front of everyone. I never expected to become a stranger in my own home. But by the time Joss and Candace had finished with their decor upgrades, I was exactly that, a ghost with a name no one would call. After the debacle at my birthday, things shifted. The family portrait on the wall was replaced, photographs of Joss, Liam, and Candace smiling in matching outfits. No trace of me remained. No image of me at the old kitchen counter, no faded shot of me holding Liam as a baby. I asked about the frames, and Candace replied, "Oh, we're redoing the gallery. You'll get your turn later." But later never came. At dinner, the seating chart was reconfigured. I was not seated at the head table with the guests. Instead, I was shown to a small table tucked into the corner behind a heavy curtain. The host, Joss, sat with other VIPs. They placed my plate silently, then ignored me as they conversed in refined voices. I felt the table vibrate with conversation, jokes I could not follow. I ate quietly, tasting edges of food, hearing laughter, and feeling excluded. Candace instituted new household rules. No talking about the past, no reminiscing, no anecdotes about the old days. And, my least favorite, they forbade speaking Spanish in front of guests. "We don't want awkward translations," Candace told me, voice cool. Her words stung like acid. The language in which I prayed, sang lullabies, whispered secrets, to be disallowed. She said it would make guests uncomfortable. I bit my tongue. One evening, a group of Joss's business colleagues arrived. They mingled, introducing themselves. One woman glanced at me and asked, "And who is she?" Joss answered with a shrug and practiced nonchalance. "Oh, just someone who used to live here. Long story." Her tone implied I did not belong. I was not worth explaining. I felt each syllable like a hammer. The label roommate began to follow me in whispers. A friend stayed overnight and later told me, "Candace introduced you as the former roommate in the villa." I was stunned. A former roommate, someone who had once lived somewhere, who might at any moment move out or be forgotten. Not a mother, not a matriarch, not a person of value. They moved my things, my books, my framed sheet music, my shawls, into the smallest bedroom at the end of the hallway. It was dim, with a narrow window facing the garage wall. The walls were painted pale gray, with no character. The ceiling light flickered. I went in one evening to find half my clothes missing, half my jewelry gone. I asked Candace, and she said, "Some of your things were cluttering up walkways. We're storing them for you." Liam came into my room one afternoon, stood at the threshold. He looked thin, nervous. He asked in a small voice, "Grandma, why don't you ever eat with us anymore?" I looked at him, surprised. His face was earnest, confused. I swallowed. Candace interrupted his voice through the door. "Because she doesn't belong anymore." Her voice echoed down the hallway. Liam's shoulders slumped. He turned away without another word. I closed the door and sank to the floor, chest shaking. For a moment, I felt like the air itself had turned against me. Days went by. I tried to reach out to friends, neighbors, but Candace had changed phone lines. Invitations to garden parties, book clubs, dinner gatherings, gone. When I asked, I was told, "They forgot to include you." At social events, a seat would be set at a far corner. Waiters would ask me if I was a guest, visiting. I would nod, though it was my home. Liam's school awards night came, and Joss invited every guest to the big dining table, but I was told to stay upstairs. She said it was too late for me to dress appropriately. I overheard in the hallway, "She doesn't match the ambiance." My heart broke. One evening, Candace sat at the living room, leading a small meeting with Joss and business partners. I heard her voice. "We no longer allow promotions to be announced in her presence. It's safer to avoid her involvement." The word "we" cut me deeper than any insult. She did not even use my name. In my room, I paced. I touched the walls, the pale paint, the lonely floorboard that creaked underfoot. I remembered how that room used to hold family laughter, bedtime stories, soft prayers. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, not a prison. I opened my window at night and listened to distant laughter, glasses clinking, soft music. I felt the heat of the party drift upward like smoke, carrying voices that had once belonged to me. I closed the window, but the memory lingered. Liam slipped into my room one night. He held a small notebook. "I copied a story you told me long ago," he said quietly. I turned toward him. He hesitated. "They say you belong to the past," he whispered, "but I want you to belong to now." Tears glistened in his eyes. I wrapped him in my arms. I whispered, "I belong wherever love remains." I stood later in the hallway, listening to muted chatter. In that silence I resolved I would no longer be hidden. If they saw me as a roommate, a relic, an inconvenience, they would see the strength beneath the dust. I woke early, before the sun crept over the hills, and began the soup. I pulled out bones, vegetables, herbs. The aroma grew slowly in the kitchen: cilantro, onion, garlic. I remembered making this for Joss when she was 5 and said, "Mama, this smells like home." I allowed a brief smile, then turned serious. Tonight, unlike other nights, I would bring something that meant more than decor. It would mean blood, memory, dignity. The staff arrived early, setting tables, polishing silver, arranging crystal vases. Through the kitchen wainscoting, I glimpsed Charlotte critiquing placements, whispering to photographers. They would frame every image perfectly, every guest poised, every glass gleaming. Except me. I ladled the soup into bowls, stepping carefully through the corridor toward the dining room. Candace appeared, arms folded, expression sharp. She took one smell of broth, and her face twisted. "That's not what we serve here, Mom," she said coldly. Before I could respond, Candace grabbed the pot and tipped it violently into the sink. The liquid spilled, splashing over tiles, the scent of cilantro and stock flooding down the drain. My heart sank. The bowls I carried clattered, soup lost, effort dissolved. I stood, shock and heat rising. Candace smirked. "We have a caterer. We don't do your rustic food." Her tone was public, deliberate. Guests in the hall paused. One man murmured, "Is that her mother's kitchen?" Another raised a camera. Joss stepped forward, arms dainty. She nodded at the staff. They began sweeping bowls, fruit, crumbs, erasing every trace. The hall's lights dimmed, the focus sharpened at the front, where dignitaries and friends were assembled. A flash went off. I was left behind the closed doors, watching glass and laughter, the music swelling beyond walls. My legs trembled. At 3 o'clock, the staff locked my door, not gently, but with finality. The key turned, bolted. I banged. I pleaded, but they had rehearsed silence. Outside, I heard clinks of silverware, the hum of conversation, spoken toasts. The wall separated me from a life I used to occupy. In my shutting door, I heard footsteps, the photographer tuning his lens, the host's laughter warming the room as though I had vanished already. I sank to the floor. My soup spoons rattled in the cabinet door. I pressed my back to the wood, trying to feel something, the memory of living. Hours passed. The distant laughter hollowed into a wound. Through the vents, soft chords of string music floated in, the click of wine bottles, toasts made in my name. Yet I was not called, not seated, not included. At one point, I heard Charlotte's voice, loud, confident. "Make sure to capture her picture on the staircase. It will show how far she's fallen." A mocking suggestion. I cringed, pressing my fingers into the carpet, the echo of those words a lash. Then came the flash of cameras outside the door. The windows of the banquet hall glowed. The carpet, the guests, the fine dresses, everything staged. I was concealed, ignored. No one turned for me. Somewhere between afternoon tea and evening toasts, Liam tiptoed to my door. He whispered, "Grandma?" I recognized the crack in his voice before I saw him against the frosted glass. His face was sad. He cupped his hand, but I could not reach out. The door would not budge. Later, in the hall, I heard the sound of cameras clicking in the ballroom. Joss stood at the center, glass raised, crowd applauding. Photographers angled for the shot. I was not present, not included. After dinner, Charlotte approached Grace, a guest, and said plainly, "She's just not part of this anymore." She patted her hair, looked at her phone. The guest nodded perfunctorily, moving on. That was her introduction. As the evening waned, the party dispersed. I remained in my locked room, the walls thin, the air stale. I counted minutes by the echoing laughter that died down. I thought of my soup, washed away. I thought of my years, erased. I thought of Liam outside the door, longing to be included. At midnight, I slipped my hand under the door. I could hear chairs scraping, footsteps leaving, engines starting. The guests departed. The lights dimmed. Silence returned. I stood and touched my hair where the wax had dripped, wiped my face where frosting clung. In the dimness, I knelt and felt in my shawl for the USB. It was there, warm with purpose. Tonight they hid me. Tomorrow they would reveal the truth. I waited until the house had quieted. The chatter from the dinner faded, the music stilled. In the corridor outside my locked room, I touched the doorknob, felt the cold metal. My heart pounded. I thought of the dessert table, the ruined bowls, the laughter I could no longer hear. It was time. I turned back and crossed the hall into the small storage room behind the kitchen, the place they called junk closet. It was cramped, dusty, stacks of old suitcases, moldy photo albums, weathered documents. The dim bulb overhead rattled. I pulled aside boxes, shifted faded fabrics, until I found the back wall panel. My fingers traced a seam. With a firm push, the panel gave way. Behind was a shallow niche containing a lockbox I had installed years ago. I carried the box into my room, closed the door softly, and set it before me. My hands shook as I opened the lid. Inside were folders heavy with documents, the original deed to the house, in my name alone, past tax records showing I paid property taxes even when the roof leaked, corporate papers for the spa business, hidden accounts in offshore trusts I had established the day Joss was born, share certificates, a stack of canceled checks from when I loaned Joss seed money, and at the bottom, a red USB stick, the one I retrieved from the birthday cake. I picked up the USB and felt weight in my palm. I slipped it into my blouse pocket and then flipped through a folder marked Family Trust Divided by Agreements. One page caught my eye. A meeting transcript from 4 years ago, a family meeting at which Joss signed a lifetime support agreement, signed in my presence with her own hand, promising to care for me, maintain property rights, to never strip me of voice or access while alive. That agreement had a clause. Breach of moral conduct, including humiliation, public insult, would nullify all her privileges and transfer them to me or a beneficiary of my choosing. I closed the box and sat in the dim lamplight, breathing in the stillness. For years I had held this in quiet. I placed the word proof over every insult, every cruelty, like markers in a ledger. The USB would reveal voices: Joss, Candace, clients, speaking ill, mocking me, planning exclusion. I retrieved the USB, slipped it into my laptop, and opened a folder labeled Family Meeting, 2019. The recording began, voices tinny but clear. "I will handle all property. Mom should stay at home. She doesn't understand brand. She's old, fragile. She has legal title, but we manage. That's the agreement. If she ever speaks out, she forfeits support. Yes, remove her name from promotional materials. She is a liability." My chest burned listening. But a smile, small, fierce, spread across my face. I typed a note to the file. Exhibit A, breach of agreement. Then I called Franklin Pierce. His voice on the phone, aged but strong. Ruth, is that you? It's been a long time. Yes, I said, voice steady. I need you. Of course, anything. What have you discovered? I told him about the deed, the agreement, the recordings, the cruelty they inflicted, the humiliation. He was silent a moment. Then, let's remind them what loyalty looks like. We plotted. First, Franklin would file a formal notice of breach of the lifetime support agreement and petition the court to enforce the clause that I assume full control over all property, assets, and the spa business. Second, he would serve them with copies of the recording, publicly if needed. Third, he would freeze their access to accounts tied to the property. I listened, feeling strength return. I once saved his wife when she had cancer, driving her to treatments, lending money. He had never forgotten. Now, he would repay the kindness. That night, I drafted a letter. To the bank, to corporate partners, to press outlets. I wrote, I hold title. I hold proof. I will no longer be silenced. I attached the USB file, the signed agreement, share certificates showing I retained controlling interest. I sealed it and sent it to Franklin. Before dawn, I locked that storage room tighter, replaced the panel, and returned to my tiny bedroom. My shoulders ached, but I lay awake, knowing I had begun. By morning, I felt renewed, no longer a relic, not a ghost. I was a power quietly awakening. In their banquet hall, they would wake to a reckoning. I woke to the ring of the phone. Franklin's voice crackled through. The complaint has been filed. I've served Joss and Candace with notice of breach. They have 24 hours to respond before we go public. My heart thudded. The time had come. By midday, Franklin sent the complaint to the California Office of the Elder Rights Protection, to local newspapers, and to banking regulators. Within an hour, emails flooded Joss's business inbox. Account access suspended, pending review for fiduciary misconduct. The bank froze all accounts linked to Joss and Candace, citing the complaint and potential legal liability. Their cards declined, wire transfers blocked. Meanwhile, Franklin executed clause after clause in my favor. The spa company papers I had hidden were now activated. The share certificates and trust documents named me as majority stakeholder. The corporate filings, long dormant, were legally validated. Overnight, Joss lost control of the spa she built. I became its rightful owner, by law, by agreement, by virtue of proven breach. That afternoon, I sat in my parlor. Franklin sent a press release. Former matriarch reclaims estate, exposes abuse in private family trust. Alongside, he released a video compilation, Joss mocking me on multiple occasions, Candace making jokes about my mud smell, the banquet footage of me locked out. The images were sharp, the audio clear, the web lit up. Headlines: Daughter insults mother, loses empire. 70-year-old woman overturns family betrayal via secret recording. At 5 p.m. Joss burst through the door of the spa office, face ashen, her voice pitched in anger. You set me up, you planned this, you used my love as bait. She flung accusations like knives. Candace hovered behind her, tears and fury tangled. They expected me to cower. I stood, calm. No, I said simply. I just recorded what was already true. I held up my hand, the USB gleaming in light. You chose your words. I only preserved them. The room held its breath. She advanced, but I did not flinch. You betrayed me, she spat. You hid it. You trapped me. I shook my head. I didn't trap you. You let me. You built your life denying me. I was just waiting for the day you showed your true face. Candace's lower lip trembled. All those years you deceived us, she cried. You raised us to love you, then struck back. You forced me to survive, I answered. You made me invisible, erased from photos, locked in rooms, and you told the world I did not belong. Now I belong everywhere. A click. The employees in the spa office were watching me on screen. The video played behind me. Joss's voice mocking, Candace's laughter, their faces on public display. Outside, press clambered. Reporters knocked at the spa's front, cameras rolled. Joss's name trended. Clients canceled memberships. Investors withdrew funds. Candace sank into a corner, eyes wild. The board of the spa was convened. With my majority stake and legal standing, I installed new leadership, me as interim CEO. Joss was ousted, Candace severed, the locks changed, her office was rekeyed to my administration. The building she once claimed as her domain now bore my name. In her confusion, Joss screamed again. "This is not fair. You cheated." I turned to her, my voice low. "Fairness is reclaiming what was stolen. I did not cheat. I documented what you chose to show." She paled. I felt no joy in her ruin, only fulfillment. At sunset, I walked through the spa, my steps echoing in halls once walked by them. I touched photographs, new ones, including me, hung with dignity. The reception desk bore a brass plate, Ruth Delgado, owner and founder. I paused at a framed image of my younger self, holding Liam. I placed a hand there, whispered, "Welcome home." Outside, Joss and Candace exited the building. A cluster of reporters waited. Joss raised her voice, "Mom destroyed my life." But she was faint, broken. Cameras flashed. I walked past them, dignified, steady. Liam appeared at the entrance. He ran to me. I crouched and gathered him in my arms. The team around us snapped photos. The public saw something they had never seen before, a mother and grandson reunited in victory. In that moment, I knew I had not only reclaimed a house and business, I had reclaimed my name, my legacy, my dignity, and they had nowhere left to hide. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. Franklin's message, "Open the headlines." My breath caught. I tapped the screen. There it was. "Daughter kicks out mother. Loses $5. 7M fortune." An article from a major news outlet. Joss's face plastered across the page, eyes wide, mouth open in outrage. Below, sub-headlines. "Spa empire shifts control to mother. Once beloved heiress, now disgraced." My pulse stilled. This was the moment. By noon, my staff received calls. Clients canceling memberships, property managers demanding transfer paperwork, lawyers inquiring about shares, everything shifting. The spa's board meeting convened early. Joss arrived in a sleek black dress, makeup heavy, face drawn. She attempted to stride through the lobby with authority, but staff stood aside. The receptionist motioned her to wait. A newcomer executive, selected by Franklin, accompanied me to the board table. Joss's voice cracked in the meeting room. "You have no right to do this. I built this business." She lunged for papers, tried to defend her seat. The board chairman, stern, interrupted. "By Clause 7.4 of the trust agreement, your breach voided your management rights. All control is reassigned to Ms. Delgado immediately." The gavel dropped. Her protests echoed hollowly. A registrar presented the share certificate reassignment. Joss sank. Outside, paparazzi swarmed as she exited. Candace trailed, face pale, clutching her phone. Their driver's car idled. Joss lifted a trembling face. "Mom, please, we didn't mean it." Her voice cracked, drip of regret. She held out a trembling hand. I stood on the top step. I looked at her for a long moment. I said in a calm voice, "You meant every word when you laughed." The memory echoed. The nudge, the insult, the candle in my hair, the cake smear. She flinched. The cameras clicked. Behind me, Liam stood, quiet until now. He stepped forward and his voice rang, "She's the only one who ever meant love." His small frame throbbing with emotion. Joss's eyes flickered to him, brow furrowed. She swallowed. Candace's phone buzzed. She cradled it, vertigo in her eyes. The board member escorting them said, "That's enough." Candace was removed from the executive list. The board declared her position terminated for conflict of interest. She slumped, shock and shame mixing on her face. Joss placed a hand on the doorframe of the mansion. She carried a tattered suitcase she had brought with her. The valet refused to open the gate for her. She paused, suitcase dragging, face ashen. She took one step forward, then another, but the door locked behind her. Security lights flickered. A crowd had gathered across the street. Neighbors whispered. Cameras streamed live. She raised her voice. "Please, Mom, I will do anything. Just give me one chance." Her words faltered amid shouts. I remained on the porch steps, firm. Liam came to my side. I rested a hand on his shoulder. The headline across the plaza glowed on a billboard. Ruth Delgado reclaims her legacy. The mansion behind me, the spa behind me, all finally in my name again. Joss turned away, pulling her scarf tight. She walked down the walkway, suitcase wheels grinding. Candace followed, head bowed. The press swarmed them like vultures. Behind them, the iron gates closed, the locks changed. I stepped lower, following Liam's hand in mine. The cameras recorded every moment. Some guests from the old party came forward, applauding. Colleagues I had once served in kindness nodded. A few strangers whispered, "She deserved this." Each nod was a drop in my reservoir of long-held justice. In that hour, Joss had lost everything: her role, her prestige, her house, her resources. She was no longer queen of that domain. She was a traveler without kingdom. And I was the monarch of what she fled. I whispered to Liam, "You stay with me." He nodded, tears in his eyes. In the distance, Joss rounded the final bend, disappearing into the night. Her silhouette fragile, suitcase small. The mansion behind me, lit in evening glow, stood as fortress of memory and new purpose. I turned the porch light off. The cameras still clicked after darkness fell, but in that silence, I felt something sweet. Home. Because for the first time in years, I belonged where I stood. I walked through the front gates early in the morning, dew still clinging to the hedges, birds calling overhead. The mansion that once held secrets and insults now stretched open, waiting. I signed the paperwork in the library, where I had once been excluded. The deed passed quietly, legally, the full title now in my hands. This home would no longer be a fortress of pain, but a refuge for those like me. It became for the forgotten elders. The spa, once Joss's pride, was reborn. A new sign went up in the lobby, Sanctuary by Ruth. Under that name, older women who had been abandoned, ignored, mocked, or forgotten would come for care, haircuts, therapy, conversation, warm meals. No fees, no questions, just dignity. Every Tuesday morning, I stood in the renovated kitchen wing and taught a baking class for children in the neighborhood. The first recipe I chose, bread, the very thing with which they had once insulted me. I showed the kids how to knead, how to let the dough rest, how to treat even simple things with respect. The smell of yeast and flour-filled corridors that once smelled only of despair. Children giggled as they dusted flour across their noses. A girl asked why we tapped the loaf twice before baking. I whispered, "To remind it is loved." Liam came each week. He wore jeans and t-shirts now, his hair grown. He assembled the tables, washed dishes, read stories to visitors in the lounge. He told me he loved the smell of this place, not like mud, but like home. One afternoon, as dusk fell, we sat on the porch steps with a tray of freshly baked rolls. He handed me one, warm, crisp on the outside, soft inside. He said, "Grandma, everyone should have a place like this. You made it for them." I squeezed his hand and smiled. In that moment, I saw women walking in, arms open, stepping through the gate, some with canes, some with broken spirits. One older woman paused at the threshold, looked back at the street, then stepped forward slowly. Another followed. They carried small bags, hesitant faces, hope in their eyes. My heart swelled. I had traded a fortress built with locks for a home built by hope. I whispered to them, "Welcome home." They stepped inside. Years later, the grounds bloomed with flowers planted by the women who came, roses, lavender, jasmine. They named paths after memories. Resilience Way, Memory Lane, Second Wind Court. The spa walls bore pictures, not of Joss or Candace, but of the women who found solace. Smiles reclaimed, hands rejoined, dignity restored. Once, a reporter arrived and asked me, "Why do this? Why give up your privacy?" I looked at Liam, at the women around me, and said, "I was erased once. I vowed I would never let others be erased again." She nodded, tears in her eyes. At weddings, birthdays, funerals, the center became a gathering place. People toasted under string lights. Children ran through gardens. Laughter echoed where once there was silence. On my 85th birthday, Liam raised his glass before everyone. To my grandmother, who taught us that no one is too old to belong. They clinked glasses, teacups, water glasses, small cheers. I looked at faces, worn and hopeful, and I thought, this is what inheritance looks like. I walked through the halls, fingers brushing the banisters, pausing at the photo of Joss's birthday party, removed and replaced by a mural, a mosaic of those women's faces. I smiled. My story was no longer about a daughter's insult. It was about a life reclaimed, a home reborn, and many doors forever open. I looked toward the gate, no locks visible. The path was always open. I whispered to myself, to them, to the memory of that birthday. They said I smelled like rotten mud, but I smelled of bread, of rain, of forgiveness, and now I smell of purpose. I stepped outside, arms wide, the night air cool. Behind me, the mural glowed in golden floodlights. Ahead of me, the gate opened, inviting for whoever needed to walk through. I wasn't family anymore, but now I am everyone's mother. I never used to wear lipstick. Joss once told me red made me look too loud. But now, every morning, I line my lips in a color called courage. I wear it with my silver curls pinned high and a silk scarf I bought from a local woman's shop, the kind Joss would have mocked for being too colorful. But I don't dress for approval anymore. I dress for joy. After decades of saving, rationing, and hiding behind thrift store quiet, I bought my first pair of real leather heels. Not for anyone. For me. I walked around the house in them for hours the first day, laughing. I danced in the hallway, alone, but free. I took a painting class. I painted a portrait of a woman standing in a field, arms wide, skirt blowing. When the instructor asked who it was, I said, me. But the version I silenced for 70 years. I traveled. I boarded a train to Oregon, just because I had never seen redwoods up close. I stood beneath them, head tilted all the way back, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt small in a beautiful way, not in a shamed one. I let myself cry now. Not the tight, hidden tears of old, but the soft ones that come when a song plays, or when Liam wraps his arms around me and says, "You're the best person I know." I let those tears fall freely. They are not weakness. They are water to the garden I'm still growing. I started saying, no. A full sentence. I used to smile and say, maybe later, when I meant please stop. But now I say, gently but clearly, no, thank you. I no longer explain away my discomfort. I don't let anyone speak for me. I don't whisper my worth. I framed the insult Joss gave me. You smell like rotten mud. I typed it, centered it in black on white paper, and framed it beside a pressed flower. Visitors always ask why. I tell them, because that was the moment I was reborn. I don't hide it. I honor it. That cruelty birthed the revolution. I created a scholarship for immigrant mothers going back to school. I called it the Mud Fund, because mud grows roses, because mud keeps you grounded, because mud isn't something to scrub off, it's something to build from. I go to the movies now, alone. I laugh loud. I buy popcorn with extra butter. I sit wherever I want, and if the ending is sad, I cry. No one tells me to quiet down, and I don't shush my joy anymore. I planted a fig tree in the back garden. It's slow, stubborn. I named it Anna, after my mother. Every time it grows a new leaf, I sit beside it and talk to her. I tell her what I've done. I tell her I've finally learned what she meant when she said, "Even when they bury you in dirt, remember, darling, you are a seed." I forgave Joss, in my own time, in my own way, but I never let her back into my home. Forgiveness does not mean reunion. It means peace, on my terms. She writes sometimes. I read the letters. I pray for her. But I do not answer. That is the boundary I give myself. And that boundary is love, too. I threw away the old teacups that had chipped. I bought myself a new set, gold-rimmed. I use them every morning, even when I'm alone, because I'm not waiting for guests to treat myself well. And on my 75th birthday, I wore a red dress, the boldest one in the store, with sequins and sleeves like wings. I walked into the room and the women clapped. Liam brought me a cake that said, "To the real Queen Ruth." I laughed so hard my ribs ached. That night, when everyone left, I stood in the mirror, wiped off my makeup, and whispered to my reflection, Thank you for not giving up on me. Because I used to think surviving was enough. But now I know. Thriving, laughing, dressing up, crying when it's real, saying no, planting trees, framing pain, helping strangers, eating cake with no apology, that's how we love ourselves back to life. I was never just someone's mother. I am now fully my own. And that is a revolution no one saw coming. Not even me.